Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerry Petrov, and welcome. I'm really interested in this presentation as well. Tracy Regillo, okay. So, Tracy's worked in the field of deafblindness for 30 years. Oh my God, I got you beat, but that's still a lot. And spent 25 years at her school board as an intervener. So she's a trained intervener as well. Tracy's a valued member of the Canadian Helen Keller Center team in a variety of roles, including 20 plus years as an instructor and 16 years as an intervener. So she's a loving wife to her husband who has Usher syndrome. They have been married for almost 28 years and have 3 beautiful children together. Tracy's family has grown up in and around deafblind community, and it's a variety of services and service people. Tracy has offered a unique perspective both as an intervener and a family member of a person receiving intervention services. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up and let Tracy take over. Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, we're going to try to multitask because I've got it on my phone. It's wonderful to meet everybody here today. You all are a little bit blurry because if I put my glasses on, I can't read my phone. So I'm sure there's a few of you that have that same issue. If I start to speak too fast and you need me to slow down for communication purposes, please just raise your hand. It starts to flow a little fast sometimes, so please slow me down. I have no problems with that. My name is Tracy Regillo. I'm 5'3". I'm dressed in head to toe in black, wearing typical intervener clothes. I have long brown hair with a little bit of gray sticking out the sides, but that's okay. I didn't have time to dye it before I came. So this is me. I am here to present on the family perspective. I have a unique approach because we have intervention services in our family, as well as I work in the field of deafblindness. Some of you might know my husband. He's the rock star walking around with the sunglasses on and has a lineup of people to chat with. That is my husband. I was teasing him that coming to this conference, he's coming on my tailcoat, like it's my coattails this year because I'm presenting, but I seem to think that changed when he seems to have the entourage around him the whole time. So this is my moment, so I'm going to take it. My phone keeps turning off too, so of course. So this is just the family's perspective. So a little bit about myself. I'm a graduate from the intervener program, the first class back in a long time ago, 1993. And I worked at CNIB when I first came out of the program. I worked as a literacy instructor and then as a volunteer coordinator as well as an intervener. And from there, I went into the school board. Basically, we had our first child, and from that point, it was just easier to work in the school board. The hours worked, right? It was great. Working in the school board, I was working in the congenital field, and I found that I wasn't using my sign as much. So I wanted to continue to use my sign besides at home, because signs at home sometimes can get a little bit slack. And so I wanted to keep up my intervention skills, and so I went back to Rotary Cheshire, which is also known as CHKC now. There I've worked as an outreach intervener, so I'd get called for different shifts, and I still continue to work as an outreach, which is basically occasional, so I work at least once a month as an intervener. In 2002, when I was very pregnant with my last child, the director asked me to come on as a staff member, as an instructor, and so I have been there since then, and we had tried to establish some peer support group meetings to bring people into the community and try to expand services with CHKC. So I have been in there in the aspect as an instructor since 2002, and I work in a variety of instructor positions. My biggest one is probably meal prep, where we have consumers come in and we do meal prep with them, and they go home with a variety of meals. It's social, it gives them the experience, it also gives them food. So that's probably the one that I'm best known for at CHKC. So a little bit about me. The person standing up in the corner, that's me with Elio. He doesn't have his rock star sunglasses on, but that is him, I promise you. He is like 6'3" and gray hair and dark eyes, and he has Usher syndrome. Underneath there's a picture of my 3 beautiful children. I promised them that I wouldn't put a small picture of them as being little people anymore, as much as I miss those days. So Ryan is in the far right with the green skirt and black shirt. In the middle is our baby, and that is Sheridan Grace. And our oldest is Griffin Robert, and he's on the left wearing a gray shirt and a toque, because boys wear toques inside for some reason. I have 2 cats. They are my therapy cats. I love them to death. If you were an intervener and you came to my house, you're guaranteed to go home with cat fur. Promise you that. I'm actually very shy. I am an introvert. I have major social anxiety, so I will be the one that's avoiding everybody when we're at the conference. But I am friendly. I just need to get into my own comfort zone. So we're here to talk about intervention and the perspective of the family. So what is intervention, right? So if somebody said to you, what's intervention? These are some common words that we would use. So independence. Intervention brings independence to our consumers. It provides access to the world, to the environment, to communication. Communication in a whole, so communication whether it's tactile sign or pro-tactile or two-hand manual or signed exact English, cue communication. There's such a variety of communication depending on the needs, but that's what intervention does. It provides communication. And interaction. Deaf blindness can be very isolating, and so having that intervention provides that interaction with the world and with people. And involvement. So I guess we all have experienced COVID, right? The big C word. And the isolation was real for a lot of the consumers out there. And so even before that, having that intervention allowed them to be involved in community, with family, and different things in our world that we might take for granted. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit on that kind of perspective with us. So intervention for the family. So we didn't always have intervention. Intervention when Elio and I first got married, he was a huge denial. There's, yep, I have Usher syndrome, but I'm good. I'm independent. I don't need intervention services. That changed pretty quickly. By the time he was 30, he was using a white cane. He calls it his miraculous moment because the parting of the seas. So we went from worrying of him falling into the subway in Toronto to suddenly people moving out of his way. We had huge fears for him because he's 6'3", and with Usher syndrome's tunnel vision, and so he would give a lot of dirty looks to strangers because he couldn't see. And so that dirty look, we used to worry that was going to get him into trouble. And so once we brought the white cane into the picture, people moved, and people started to understand that that dirty look isn't actually a dirty look. He can't see, right? So that was huge for us. It also meant us letting go, as well as his family letting go. So a lot of people that have family members, you know that your role is you're the first intervener usually. And so when intervention is now brought into the family, you have to let go. You have to step back, and that is hard. That's hard if you've done that role for so long. As a wife, it was difficult, but as a mother, it was even probably more difficult for my husband's family as well, because for like 30 years, that was your job. So that is the whole thing of being able to step back and letting those interveners that are skilled allow them to do their jobs. Access, having intervention opened access to everything for us. Access to family members that maybe we never could speak with, access to services, doctor's appointments that you weren't relying on a family member now. So access is a huge thing for intervention for us. Communication. So I would love to tell you that we have amazing interveners all the time and the communication skills are perfect. Nope. And that comes with practice. Elio has Usher syndrome. He was culturally deaf. He was brought up in the deaf community, which means his first language is ASL. is American Sign Language. So as the vision has started to deteriorate, we went from American Sign Language to tactile sign language. And now we are into pro-tactile. And so there's been a change in his communication, so the needs have changed as well as the skill set of our intervenors has changed. So somebody that worked with him 10 years ago, perfect, no problem. We can go to the grocery store, we can have a meeting, not an issue. Now, he's doing pro-tactile. If you aren't up on pro-tactile, you no longer match the needs of him. Elio is one of the first people in Canada to be trained in pro-tactile, so the pro-tactile community is very small. So the skill set of intervenors is very small. So we're still working on expanding that and educating people on that. So communication and access to services is not perfect. It never is. Interaction. So for us, having intervention come into our family opened the doors to many things, including environmental, getting out into the community, work, became more accessible, going into family functions. My husband is Italian, so we go to every family function there is, right? Baptisms, weddings, christenings, somebody met somebody. Like there's always some sort of festival. And so in the past, Elio would we would sit at tables and nobody would speak to us because people didn't know how to access us. And sometimes you'd have somebody try something on the phone, but that awkwardness. So being able to bring an intervener to these events opened the doors for us to access to his family as well as outside community members. So just a little bit of the history of our intervention in our family. So when Elio and I got married almost 28 years ago, there was no intervention. We didn't use intervention. And the intervention that was available to him was 2 to 6 hours a week. And at that point, if you were using intervention, you didn't get 2 to 6 hours. So it became a lot of balancing. So any of the things that he needed done to use intervention became my responsibility. This wasn't new. I knew this when I met Elio. I knew he had Usher syndrome. So I knew that going into the marriage. I will never say that I was shocked by this. I knew that responsibility was going to be mine until he was open to receiving intervention. That meant anything from appointments, doctor's appointments, children's appointments, school activities, that became me. Many times I would refer to myself as often feeling like a single mom because the responsibility became mine. And I hear that from other people in the community that are working, saying that they feel like their families, that burden becomes theirs. As much as they don't want it to feel like a burden, it's just that responsibility becomes theirs, and it can be overwhelming. When intervention began, we were very limited with our hours, and so we had to pick. So if we had 2 hours this week and Elio had a doctor's appointment, that's what the 2 hours was used for. If he had an appointment at work, that meant his very pregnant wife went to work and interpreted the appointment for him at work. So we had to pick and choose. As intervention has expanded in the hours, it's just opened the world for us. So when intervention started and we started to get more hours, this allowed Elio to go out into the world and meet people and start to advocate and fight for services and fight for his rights. And so it opened the world to his ability to advocate as an adult, as an individual with deafblindness, but it also allowed him to work, attend social functions. He works at multiple jobs. I would love to tell you that he works a 9 to 5, but he works 4 jobs. And he works 7 days a week, and he'll probably do that until he can't anymore. And so having intervention allowed him to have access to everything that he was missing in the past. Social functions, deaf-blind community activities, going to appointments, not having to bring your wife for your physical. It's always nice. Having to go to family events that maybe the wife didn't want to go to. He could do that now, right? Because in the past, he was limited to his services, so the dependence was on the family. Having children and having intervention changed their roles as well. So as much as we want to say Elio's independent and we don't depend, he really didn't want to depend on his family. Very firm on that he didn't want to ever have to depend on his kids. There's times he had to depend on his kids. I worked at the Toronto Catholic School Board, and I worked downtown Toronto. We lived just outside of Toronto, so a block north of the city. But there would be times maybe one of the kids was sick and they needed to be picked up from school. Dad had to go pick them up from school, and that meant he was picking up all three because he needed the older one to make sure that he could guide home safely. So once intervention was brought into play, then that allowed Elio to be able to do these things and the kids not having to take on that sort of responsibility. Awkward intervention. So, party of three. Yes, so there'd be often times when we are out in the community and Elio has an intervener. We've gone to weddings and funerals where people didn't know who's the wife. Because a lot of the interveners in the community are female. And so his grandmother's funeral, for example, Elio would stand under in one corner where there's a light. Because Usher syndrome, he needed that light. So he kind of looked like he was on display with his other wife. People were gossiping at the funeral saying, oh my God, did Elio get a new wife? Who's that? Is that the ex-wife? Because people didn't understand the role. So there has been a few awkward situations where people are questioning whether, maybe we're a family of three. Elio has a little bit of some extra wives hanging around. So that has been a common thing, especially when we're using a pro-tactile. So we're walking down the street and he's holding two people's hands. So it can be a little bit awkward. When my son, who's almost going to be 27, was just an infant, Elio worked at Food Basic, a grocery store that I had gone when I was very pregnant with Griffin. They were interviewing him for this position. So I was his interpreter, and then they hired him on full time. And so we would go regularly to pick him up because it was not accessible by the buses at that point. And so we'd go pick him up, and I'd pick up some groceries. So you start to meet the staff. You start to know everybody in the store, right? You have a little baby, everyone's paying attention. That's Elio's wife and his baby. And one day coming through the cashier looked awkward. There's that look. They need to say something, but they're not sure how to say it. And so she's just said to me, dear, I feel like I need to be honest with you. Every Tuesday night, some woman comes and picks up your husband, and they walk out of here hand in hand. And I just feel like you need to know this because you have a baby, and you need to, to know this. It wasn't, it was his intervener. It was Sarah. We love Sarah, and Sarah would be there every Tuesday and Thursday. So there's that awkwardness too. There's been times where we've been walking in the store and people will be talking about, I thought that was his wife, that sort of thing. So that awkwardness of him having an affair. The same thing, talking about the new wife thing. We've had that happen at weddings and funerals and multiple times. And because Elio is so out there and I'm not, that mixed communication often happens. So I offer a unique perspective because I'm coming from the two worlds, right? I work as an intervener and I have intervention in my home. And so sometimes those worlds can collide. Elio receives services from the Canadian Helen Keller Centre. I work for the Canadian Helen Keller Centre. I love you all, any of you that are here. But it can be awkward because if Elio has a bad day with intervention and he comes home and he's like, that just wasn't working, that's my colleague. So that can be a little bit awkward. This person, didn't understand me and I'm frustrated, or they walked me into a wall. That's my colleague. So sometimes differentiating those two worlds can be difficult because I want to support him, but those are my colleagues. So it can get a little awkward. We both work for CHKC. Elio is the coordinator, the relations coordinator, consumer relations coordinator, CRC. And so we keep things very separate. People will often ask, oh, you worked with so-and-so. Does Elio know? He has no idea. I have no idea who he works with. He has no idea who I work with. We really try to keep work and life, family separate, church and home type thing. And we want to make sure that things are kept professional, right? If you don't have trust, if he doesn't trust you, you're not allowed in my house. I always tell interveners, they'll be like, I'm not sure, is this working? And I'm like, are you in my house? Then he trusts you. He's very limited on who he has come into our home. He really wants to keep those things very separate. The roles at home. So we have intervenors, the lack of privacy, and having services. All those kind of go hand in hand. So having an intervener come into my house, I don't know how you guys are, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't wash the floor. Oh my, they're judging me. They're judging me. My floor hasn't been washed. You're coming in. They're coming in to interpret with my husband for a meeting on Zoom. They don't care. We all know that, right? We all worry about how our homes look. It's hard because I could have an intervener in my house 4 times in one day. I could have an idea that, Sunday night's dishes are still sitting on the counter because it's Sunday night and I'm just done. And there's an intervener coming tomorrow morning, so I have to make sure for my own feelings that I need to pull that house together. I come home from work, I've worked 40 hours this week. What do you want to do? I just want to sit in my PJs or my comfy clothes. I can't. There's somebody coming to my house to interpret. There's somebody coming to do a meeting in my living room with the board that's like, I'm in my kitchen, hi. So those type of things, you lose that sort of privacy having the people in your home. And sometimes, sometimes you just want to sit and watch TV and somebody's come to the front door because they've come back from something with him and you feel that obligation to get up and go, hi, how are you, right? Because we're persons, we're humans. And so sometimes I just don't want to. And that's okay. That's okay. There's never been an intervener that says, you know what, I can't believe you didn't come say hi to me. They've just finished their shift. They want to go home too, right? But those are the kind of pressures that we put on ourselves having intervention into our homes. Sometimes it's not very quiet in my house. Sometimes it can be very loud because we have, especially when COVID hit, having to do stuff in the home. Everyone assumes outside of our deafblind community that having a deaf husband means your house must be very quiet. It's the complete opposite, right? Doors are slammed, things are banged. If you're on the Zoom text or a FaceTime call, he could be on a call and we don't know, and then we hear people's noise in the background on their phone and we're like, oh, you just heard my daughter singing in the background for the last hour, because it's not quiet. And so us having to adjust to that, or he's having a meeting, he's on a board and they're doing a meeting, which means I now have to stay upstairs because I need to stay out of sight. Sometimes we don't know if he's in a meeting, so you come through the front door and we're kind of like, is he here? Is he in a meeting? Because we don't want to walk in and he's in the middle of some meeting. He does different things. Sometimes he's meeting with other consumers, and the last thing we want is a consumer and being like, hey, how you doing? We want to give privacy to those people as well. So I know nobody wants to talk about COVID, but I think it's important that we talk a little bit about this. So I don't know how you guys were, but I was a little bit, everything got cleaned. Everything got cleaned. I didn't want anybody catching COVID from coming into my home. And so we would have an intervener come in the morning, and then we might have a different intervener come in the afternoon. So when they came in the morning, we disinfected Elio's desk, we wiped everything down, we cleaned the main floor bathroom, because if you need to use the washroom, we want you to be able to use the washroom. Disinfected everything. And then when they left, the next person came, we had to re-disinfect things. So COVID for us was a huge adjustment, and also that pressure of where have those interveners been? How many other people's houses have they been in? No, they're 19. Have they been out at a bar? Have they been out socializing with their family? That added stress of having COVID and then bringing interveners into our house got to the point that we just had less service. It was just too much stress for everybody in the family. Yeah, and keeping distance. So if the whole idea is we had interveners, we had to make sure we had our masks on, we were keeping distance. Masks didn't work great. We had shields at one point, we had goggles, so it just became too much. So then we started requesting interveners that maybe he had only seen once a day or only worked once a day. So there was less exposure to be brought into the home, as well as our exposure. We have 3 young children, 2 of them are living at home, and so the same thing, we'd be like, you can't go out because we can't take the chance of you being exposed to something and then bringing that to your father that gives intervention. Because if your dad gets sick and he goes into the hospital, there's no services right now. He's left in a hospital. So that added stress, we just started having less people come in for services. So if you ask my children about intervention, and have an intervener come in, especially when they were little, it has changed, but when they were little, if an intervener came to the door and didn't say anything to them, they were offended, right? Because I'm 8, I'm here, I'm Elio's kid, you have to pay attention to me. So positive things for kids is just eye contact, hi, how are you, humanizing the intervener. You have to understand, as interveners, they're working with their dad. That's their dad. And so they want to make sure that you're a good person. So simple eye contact and saying hello made a huge difference for them. These are from, we asked them how they felt about this. Having intervention meant that dad went to graduations. That didn't happen before. Went to school interviews. Sometimes that was a good thing, sometimes not. And he, like, my girls were both competitive dancers, so he was able to go to dance competitions and be there, whether he could see them or not. Just him being there and being present meant a lot to the kids. We have, like I said, our 2 cats. So at one point, one of our cats had to be taken to emergency, and we had an intervener show up for the shift, and they were like, let's go, let's take this cat to emergency. And for our kids, that was huge, because this was their pet, and they were like thinking, how are we gonna get this cat there? Mom's at work, and so having that intervention and bringing that really opened the door to my kids liking interveners being around. Some of the negative things, because life wouldn't be anything without some negativity, right? So we've had times where we've had interveners feel that they need to discipline my children, you know, and it could be a quick scolding or saying, you know, you shouldn't be doing that, as opposed to giving that information to their father, who should be the one making that decision. So that a couple times would turn them off, having an intervener around their dad, and almost made them more protective of their dad, because they felt that person was speaking for their father as opposed to supporting him. Needing to interpret for his kids, I would love to tell you that all 3 of my children are skilled signers. Nope. Is ASL their first language? Nope. I have 3 children, 3 very different personalities, 3 different forms of communication. My son only learned to sign really well when he became a teenager, because you can't argue with your father if you can't sign. So that's when his skills just really improved. My middle daughter, Ryan, walked at 9 months old, did everything really, really quick, and so her form of communication was finger spelling, fast. When Dad was young, 30, 32, that was easy. As Dad's vision's changed, he no longer can follow finger spelling, so that was a huge adjustment for her. Our youngest, from the time she was born, Dad was using tactile sign at that point, so she's always been very good at using the tactile sign, and has taken sign language through university as well, and has adapted really well into the pro-tactile. 3 different kids, 3 different forms of communication. Doesn't mean they love Dad any different, but it's the same as you have with your regular kids. Intervention changes. So these are the changes. I think my kids were saying that they recognize how much of a benefit intervention has been for Dad. Dad's not a recluse. Dad has never been a recluse. But when the vision started to change, we started to notice all he did was sit on his computer. Suddenly having those interveners, he's out there. He went out, he became an advocate. He fought for services. He's out in the community. We tease him, he's the rock star here with people. Like, he's well known, and he loves it. And that's part of his personality. He loves people, he loves communicating. And so having interveners, my kids said they can see their dads shine. Elio travels all over the place. I'm very excited, he's going away for 2 weeks again. And he travels by himself. He travels independently. And so intervener gets him to the airport, gets him onto the plane, and away he goes, and somebody meets him on the other end. Many times we're hoping somebody's meeting him on the other end because he's a little bit cheap and doesn't want to have to pay for the using your phone in a different country, and so we have to hope Wi-Fi when he lands, and so we can let him know he's made it there safe. But yeah, so having that, the kids have seen that Dad, that's opened the world to him, and he's able to access the world again. It's not such a small world. They worry less about him using the transit. Elio still uses the transit, and because we just live north of the city, we have to use YRT, which is York Region Transit, so he has to change transits. And so he goes from using a bus onto a subway. And so that can be really nerve-wracking. I would love to tell you as an intervener, pick him up every day, and then they go to work together, and then they come home together. Nope. Because we are still fighting for that independence. As much as we would love Elio to do that, he's not there yet. But when it's time that he's out at a meeting and maybe it's late at night, the kids said they feel better knowing that he has an intervener that's bringing him home, whether it's transit or driving. And it gives them that feeling of security for their dad's safety. The kids like it now that they can speak for themselves. They can have a conversation with an intervener. There was oftentimes interveners would kind of interrupt and try to interpret for them, and that became really frustrating when they were little. The interveners trying to do their job, but that's Dad. I just want to have a conversation with Dad without you in it. And so now as adults, they recognize that they can have that role and have that conversation and be able to say, it's okay, I can talk to my dad. Intervention has opened the world for us, for the extended family. My family is all hearing, Elio's family is all hearing. Elio's family is of Italian descent, so sign language, it was not used in the home. And so having intervention brought in opened the door to him having conversations and relations with people in his extended family, as well as his own parents. And that worked even well for us too. My parents didn't sign, my sisters learned a little bit of sign, but we don't all live in the same city, so having interveners at different functions allowed him to have a connection and a relationship with extended family members. Some of the issues with that is we talked about Mom letting go. So we go to a wedding and Mom for years has brought the plate of food to Elio. Now we have an intervener and he can get up independently and go get his own plate of food. So knowing how to step back from that role has been difficult for the extended family, as well as having an intervener come into their home. Maybe he went to visit the parents and now they're bringing an intervener and the parents would be questioning this intervener. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? And oftentimes we'd explain to the intervener, like, you have to do what you're comfortable sharing, but this is their son. He might be 53, but he's their baby, and you're coming into their home and you are taking over the role of something that they had to do. So the more human you are, the less stressed they're going to be. So it's something that we have encouraged. The lack of what do I do now? What do I do? That's one of the issues that we have is now what am I going to do? These are just examples of some of the experience we have. So being dependent, we're appreciative of all the services we have. The fact that we have intervention services means a lot to us. That balancing act of having, that's the role of the wife and that's the role of the intervener. So that's one of the things we struggle with. Judgment. Often people will be like, oh, you're working with Elio, you're going to be judged. And I often had people tell me that they were afraid to approach me because they think I'm judging. I'm appreciative. You want to take him out and do stuff with him? Go. Because I am appreciative of the services, because that makes him a happier person. So the saying used to be happy wife, happy life, happy hubby, happy life, right? So we're appreciative of the services. These are just some of the positive things we just went through, that things have allowed us to have a little bit more independence. Some of the negatives, again, are intervention being canceled. We depend on the service. So when intervention services are canceled, it really affects us, right? There could be appointments. It could be he was getting groceries. That's his job. He works in a grocery store. That's his job. He gets the groceries for the family. Intervention's canceled, or they don't have a car. Now he's coming back on a bus with groceries for a family of 5. That's still his responsibility. So those type of things make it difficult when intervention is canceled, and learn, like, if there's things that he was depending on. Sometimes the schedule doesn't match the needs. That can happen too. So that's one of the negatives. And that's my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Comments? There we go. I'm going to have the question. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Hi. So I'm an intervener. I support people that are deafblind and have neurological disabilities. And I just want to say I really appreciate this presentation because working with families, like, I support them in supported living homes, and their families come into the homes. And I think, yeah, just opening up and being human and sharing that with them is comforting to them. I guess I kind of have a question regarding siblings. I've noticed some of the siblings of the people I support are a little uncomfortable with interveners. Do you have any recommendations on how I should approach that? Because the siblings are like young 20s.
Yeah, so the 20s in itself is the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times that's the whole change in the role, right? So that is my big brother, my big sister, my little sister, and they've been that protector for so long. So I would suggest trying to make your interview as an intervener as personable as can be. Sometimes just including them in a conversation, as well as letting the consumer know that, will make you human and realize that, you know, it's okay to step back from that role. And sometimes it takes them till they're 30, and sometimes they could be in their 60s and they still don't get it. So you just have to put that out there and try your best, and if it works, it works.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Here we go. Excuse me, sir. Here you go.
Hi, thank you for a great presentation. I'm Anna Marta from Norway.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. This Pro Tactile, that's a new thing for me. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I can give you the basics because it really should come from somebody that knows the skill. But ProTactile is touch communication. So it is recognized as its own language, and it's a touch communication. Sign language is a visual language. So as I'm signing up here, as you notice, I probably had to see me holding the podium because my instinct is to sign. And so it's a visual language, right? So you're using your hands, and as the person loses their vision, they don't know what this hand is doing. They've lost it. So then they switch to tactile, and it's very limiting. So having touch means that they call it forehand touch, because the intervener is using four hands as well as two hands as well as the consumer or the deafblind person. And so it's a whole new form of communication using touch. You might notice things like people are tapping the arm. So if you and I are having a conversation in sign language, we'd be nodding our head. Yeah, 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 yeah. Can't see that anymore. So now it's the tapping of the arm. Yep, yep, yep. If I do a sign like mother, and I go mother, on somebody that has no visual field of where I am, is that mother, is that father, is that like farm? I don't know where you're doing. So there's the touching. You would take your hand and touch their shoulder to chin and then sign it so that they would have a visual of where that information is.
Great, thank you so much.
Hi. Can you just tell me a little bit about how the impact, well, we at least saw in COVID a lot of changeover in staff, how the changeover in staff happens and how it affects you guys as a family, and anything that new interveners can do when interacting with your family to help build the bonds and build the trust. Like, what did you really value from new people coming in to get that?
During COVID or just in general?
General. I mean, I think we all saw like COVID had a real effect on how much we saw changeover and stuff happen.
Right.
So when I'm looking at things, I have some individuals who've been around for like years and years supporting, and a lot of new have come in, right? I'm looking to build those bonds between the interveners and the individual we support, but also with the families. And what did you guys value when you had new staff come in?
For one of the things for me would be treating him as a person and realizing that he's his own person, and having those conversations directly with him, so that like when you come into the house, letting him know like your wife is there, giving that information means a lot to me, because then it's not me having to depend to go up to let him know I'm here. Little things like, don't drop the groceries at the front door. You don't have to carry the groceries, I'm all on that, but guide him so he doesn't walk into the wall. So just kind of maybe putting the human touch to things, because I think sometimes we get so set on being professional and doing things the right way, and I can't do this and I can't do that. I think we need to take a step back and bring the human aspect back to it, because this is a person you're working with, and so if you want me to connect with you, I need to see that you're kind and human towards my family as well as my husband.
So I think we have come to a time where you guys have to move on, I believe. Am I right? No, I have 3 minutes. So yes, please. It's my job. I have to keep everybody on time.
Hi, thank you. Hi there.
Hi.
I've actually had the privilege of meeting your husband at a workshop.
Did you say privilege?
The privilege, yeah. Yeah.
Just checking.
Yeah, at a workshop months ago. But I work as an intervener. My question for you is, do you ever feel insulted, or what's the word? Because I've been in this line of field for a long time. If I was to come in and give you my perspective on something a new perspective on something that I see coming in as a job, like how to approach that, or do you ever get insulted if somebody comes into your home and gives you new information or a new perspective of what they're seeing, or new ideas, or, oh, I've seen this before, maybe?
I think it would depend on what was being said. So if it was, if it's something that you're seeing me personally, no, don't tell me that.
Okay.
That's my relationship with my husband. I'm not judging your marriage.
Yes.
But if you're doing something about safety or intervention, I'm all open to it. I think we have interveners that have been around forever, and we have interveners that are like babies. Like I could be their mom. And so sometimes I need that new perspective to bring that young, new perspective in. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's not going to work for us. But it has to work for him. It doesn't matter what I think. It's intervention for him. And so sometimes people get stuck on that. But if it has something to do with safety or intervention, we're all open to that. Doesn't mean we have to accept it, but we're willing to hear it. And because, maybe you see something that I don't see because I've been around with him for like 30 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, our time has come to an end, and I want to thank Tracy. Please help me thank her with a round of applause.